I'm sure everybody's heard of Joseph Mengele, the Angel of Death, but what you're about to hear makes him sound like a choir boy. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the show. I am Steven M. back again. Thanks for stopping in. And today we have the most brutal, the most gruesome, the most horrendous, the most downright cruel human experiment trials ever known to man. This is spine-tingling beyond your imagination, beyond your wildest dreams. You've heard of the big unit Randy Johnson. You've heard of G-Unit. But you've never heard of anything quite like Unit 731. Let's roll the footage.
Unit 731 was a covert research and development unit of the Imperial Japanese Army during the Second Sino-Japanese War and World War II. This unit specialized in biological and chemical warfare and engaged in horrific human experimentation and the production of biological weapons. Its actions resulted in the deaths of an estimated 200,000 to 300,000 people. The victims were subjected to a range of cruel experiments, including disease injections, dehydration, biological weapons testing, hypobaric pressure chamber testing, vivisection, and amputations. Some individuals had their limbs amputated to study blood loss, and at times, the severed limbs were reattached to the opposite side of their bodies. Stomachs were surgically removed, with the esophagus then reattached to the intestines in certain cases. Other victims had parts of their organs, such as the brain, lungs, and liver, forcibly removed. In addition, subjects were subjected to excruciating trials, including deprivation of food and water to determine the time until death, exposure to low-pressure chambers until their eyes bulged out, experimentation on the effects of temperature and burns on human survival, and execution by hanging upside down. They were also crushed with heavy objects, electrocuted, dehydrated with hot fans, exposed to deadly centrifugal forces, injected with animal blood like horse blood, exposed to lethal doses of X-rays, tested with chemical weapons inside gas chambers, injected with seawater, being burned or buried alive. The extent of suffering and cruelty inflicted upon these victims is beyond comprehension.
So when you think the worst human experiments of all time, you probably think Joseph Mengele, the Nazi Angel of Death, who obviously was a horrible person. We're not going to downplay what he did, but it seems like he was Bush League compared to Unit 731. They said around 200,000 people passed away in these experiments. Those numbers vary from time to time, but what never varies is how horrendous and brutal these experiments were. Now you got to think we're coming out of World War I, headed into World War II, and there was eugenics programs all over the world. Russia, Germany, obviously, the United States was doing them. Japan, obviously, and I'm sure China had theirs going. So the exact reasons everybody was doing this, I'm not 100% sure, but we will get into that a little bit later. But first, we're going to get into exactly how horrible some of these experiments were.
I was just a farmer. Life was normal until they came. Soldiers took me away. I ended up in a place called Unit 731. That place, it was like a nightmare that never ended. They did things to us. Terrible things. They cut us open while we were still alive. No painkillers, just screams. I saw them take organs out, study them like we were animals. They made us sick on purpose, injected us with deadly diseases. We coughed blood, our bodies twisted with pain. Some didn't make it. They died in agony, their bodies broken. They tested weapons on us, gas that burned our lungs, diseases that ate us from the inside out. We begged for mercy, but they didn't care. They froze us, drowned us, and burned us. They wanted to see how much we could endure before we broke, but we were already broken. I survived somehow, but the memories, they haunt me. The screams of my friends, the smell of blood and death. I pray that no one ever has to suffer like we did. That place, Unit 731, it was hell on Earth. It was hell.
So when I got into this, I learned a word for the first time I've never heard. Vivisection. Vivisection means conducting experiments. When you look it up, it says animals, experiments on animals while they're still alive. Clearly, this is on humans. So most of these tests seem to just be done in the name of seeing what the human body can withstand while it's still alive.
So Unit 731 had hundreds of human guinea pigs, whose primary purpose was to develop these biological warfare agents, but they also conducted other experiments on these humans. One of the experiments they conducted was afflicting frostbite. So they would put them under freezing conditions to cause the tissue damage associated with frostbite. And then they would examine various means of protecting and treating frostbite. And all of this was to prepare their own soldiers for winter warfare against the Soviets. So you can imagine having your tissues frozen, sloughing off, the pain associated with that, as the Japanese scientists tried to figure out the best ways to protect their own troops from such agony during the course of winter warfare.
Could you imagine? Could you just imagine somebody freezing you to the point where you have frostbite just to try to unthaw you again to see how much you could withstand? There's a movie called Men Behind the Sun. It's an exaggerated version of what happened, but just look at this clip right here, and this is probably something like it really was. Keep that frostbite part in mind. He says it was so they could see what their soldiers could do if they had to fight in Russia in the winter. But there's another theory about this whole thing I find really interesting that's coming up a little later. And it seems like all these experiments tie in to that theory.
Unit 731 employed hypobaric chambers as part of their human experimentation program. These chambers are designed to create an environment with reduced atmospheric pressure. When individuals are exposed to lower pressure, the gases within their bodies, including nitrogen, can expand. The most common scenario is the use of a vacuum or low-pressure environment, causing bodily fluids to vaporize and tissues to expand. The eye is a delicate organ with a balance of internal and external pressures. In a low-pressure environment, the fluids within the eyes would be subjected to reduced external pressure, causing them to expand. The eye structure, not designed to withstand such conditions, would lead to increased pressure within the eyeball. The increased pressure inside the eyeball can result in the protrusion or bulging of the eyes from their sockets. This is an agonizing and irreversible process that causes severe damage to the eye tissues.
I think severe damage was probably an understatement there. You had to be one sick, twisted individual to be involved in these types of things. And let's not get it twisted, like every superpower, probably every government, still doesn't keep a ton of these type of people on the payroll. But again, why? Why would you want to know what type of pressure a human being could take until his eyes popped out of his head?
Obviously, Unit 731 conducted many attacks on Chinese targets, but they also had American troops in their crosshairs. Operation Cherry Blossoms at Night, where the Japanese had a submarine, and on the submarine it carried airplanes with folded wings on top that could take off once the submarine had surfaced. And the plan was to take these planes off the coast of California and use basically them as kamikaze drops. But they wanted to drop plague-infected fleas. It was all prepared, it was ready to go, and they pulled the plug on it at the last minute. Why, we don't exactly know. Whether it was a fear of retribution at that late point in the war, we're talking 1945, or whether the general who was in charge of that, who wasn't Shiro Ishii, but another general, had a moral compulsion about starting an epidemic.
Oh, he had a change of heart about starting an epidemic. That's nice of him. Two parts to take away from what he just said, one just as crazy as the other. First off, submarines that carry planes. Well, how would it land to come back? Well, like he said, they're kamikaze planes. So these boys get into these planes with no agenda of coming back. But the second thing he said is they were going to drop bubonic plague infected fleas on the US. How do you even think something like that up? But the weird part, this is 1945. All these dates line up right around Hiroshima. Is there a possibility that's why the US did Hiroshima? They caught wind of these bubonic plague fleas and they were like, oh hell no. Sir, the Japanese are gonna drop bubonic plague fleas on us. What do you want us to do? What the hell did you say, boy? The Japanese, they got bubonic plague fleas and they're gonna drop them on us. Oh, the hell they are. We gonna drop the bomb on them. I think it would be a good time in the video to remind everybody that it is Southeast Asian Heritage Month, and let's not forget, Stop Asian Hate.
Unit 731 spared no one from its brutal experiments and atrocities, not even its own employees.
So much for stopping Asian hate, huh?
One particularly harrowing account from Unit 731 involves Yoshio Sudo, an employee of the unit's 1st Division, who became infected with bubonic plague during the production of plague bacteria. Sudo's deteriorating condition was marked by thinness, purple spots on his body, and bleeding scratches. However, the unit saw an opportunity for more tests. So, despite his suffering, Sudo was denied mercy and subjected to the vivisection procedure. Witnesses described his desperate cries and painful struggle as the surgeon mercilessly sliced into his stomach. This chilling reality highlights the pervasive atmosphere of fear and uncertainty within the unit, where even those who facilitated the atrocities may have harbored a constant awareness that they, too, could become subjects of experimentation at any moment.
I guess putting your 2 weeks in wasn't an option at Unit 731. Sadly, Yoshio didn't make it, but here's a first-hand account of a guy that did work there in what I'm guessing is a very rare interview.
I participated in the vivisections. I did them every day. I cannot remember the number of people we dissected. At first, I refused to do it, but then they wouldn't allow me to eat. It was an order. Gradually, I changed. I did vivisections at the time. The experiment was conducted on a living Chinese woman who was infected with syphilis. She was asleep because she was alive, just like water from a tap. I have no courage to recall things like this now. They would wake up from anesthesia and cry out, "Don't hurt my children." I cannot forget these things ever. In the room, there were over 10 surgeons waiting for practice. A nurse about 20 years old stood beside the operating table. It wasn't quiet. Everyone was laughing and joking, just as usual. Then the experiment started. This time, the victim was a Chinese man. I don't know how he was captured. We didn't care whether he was innocent or not. Someone pushed him hard and he cried, kneeling on the ground, struggling backward. I also pushed him really hard. Later, he seemed exhausted and gave up hope. The nurse said to him in Chinese that he could sleep and that the anesthetic would prevent any pain. He walked slowly towards the operating table and laid on it. The vivisectionist wasn't very skilled. Altogether, 6 experiments were conducted on him, including one in which one of his arms was amputated. Almost 1.5 hours later, the operation ended and he was dead. During my 8-year stretch there, I was in charge of driving and moving prisoners for the unit. There were people from China, the Soviet Union, and Korea. Once, I sent one woman from the Soviet Union and her daughter. I saw the little girl be... She was very young and cute. Whenever I sleep, she appears in my mind like a ghost.
They starved him if he didn't take place in these vivisections. God only knows what someone could do in these situations. You know your back's up against a wall. You see what they're doing to other people. Either you take part in it or you will become it. I could never imagine, and I'm sure none of us could imagine, ever being put in such a situation. So through all this, all these horrible things these people did, Russia found out about it first. I'm not sure what went on there, but then the US found out about all this and they were supposed to prosecute these people, and apparently they were going to, but what they ended up doing was giving them all immunity, except they want the data. That's it. They just wanted the data. That was what was important to the US government at the time. Like, oh, that was pretty bad, all those things you did. Hey, how'd it go? So essentially it was something like Operation Paperclip. Hey, you guys are pretty terrible. Want to come work for us? You could only theorize over and over why they did these things. So was it for the military to see what the body could withstand if we had to fight in these temperatures or these harsh conditions? Or was it for the fact that we were on the brink of the space race? All this technology was coming together. Germany had all this technology. They had the Bell, which was something like a UFO, but we were on the brink of the space race. So where would all these things come in handy if you're a human being? What kind of pressures the body could withstand? What kind of heat or cold the body could withstand? What kind of diseases the body could withstand? The unknown. Space. So were all these countries, including Unit 731, doing these things to see what the body would endure, or what the body could endure if we made it to the final frontier.
Does it not click? Unit 731, yeah, they were doing biological and chemical warfare by releasing bacteria on towns in China, but they were also doing a lot of fucking research on frostbite. That's what the United States wanted their data for. That's why they gave them immunity. Because frostbite, what do you think happens in space? It's damn fucking cold. Your limbs literally freeze off. So what were they doing in Unit 731? They were forcibly putting people in pressurized tanks, freezing off limbs, and then trying to heal it. And so they discovered that the best way is to submerge the limb back in water that's 100-something degrees, instead of rubbing it, which was the method that we used before, friction. Anyways, the people didn't want to participate in that though. They did a bunch of other horrific shit, but yeah, it 100% relates to the fucking space race, because the United States used that data when they needed to heal motherfuckers in their own experiments when they were training astronauts in NASA to go to space.
I think it's a plausible theory. So we just learned about some of the worst things possibly to happen in human history. And I think this gentleman speaks on behalf of all of Japan when he says,
I want to apologize to the Chinese people. The Chinese people raised Japanese orphans despite what the Japanese army did in China. I would like to thank the Chinese people from the bottom of my heart. I think the Japanese should repent for their crimes and apologize to the Chinese people at the same time. I firmly oppose the revision of Japan's pacifist constitution. Why do we need to go to war? We have committed atrocious crimes against the Chinese people.
And the nice part is, I think everybody did move past it. I'm just now learning about this whole thing. I don't think they're still at war and still hate each other, and there's this giant undertone of racism going on over that way. I really don't know. But I know I don't hear about it every single day, day in and day out, for something that happened right back in the 1900s.
Unit 731. Final part. Viewer discretion is strongly advised due to the following: violence, abuse, RPE, torture, and death. After they were infected, they were vivisected at different stages so that their organs could be observed. Women were forced to become pregnant which resulted in many infected children being born, some growing up within the walls of Unit 731. However, children were mostly killed or aborted. The children were also vivisected in order to determine how longer periods of infection affected them. All experiments were conducted throughout the war until 1945, and Unit 731 was demolished. The remaining prisoners were gassed, poisoned, and shot. Staff were ordered to take the secret to their graves and were given potassium cyanide vials for use in case they were captured. Japanese troops blew up the unit and the compound in the final days of the war to destroy any and all evidence of their experiments. However, some still remain somewhat intact.
They had the chance to blow it all up. So just imagine what we don't know. Based on the technology that they had then, they were conducting these sort of experiments. Just imagine what's going on today.
Stop it, please, I beg you!
Hey, thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe.